Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we were tackling a subject that feels a little bit like looking in a mirror and realizing you've been wearing your shirt inside out
Mm,
for years.
it's a heavy topic, but honestly, based on these readings, it's a necessary one.
It really is. And to kick things off, I want to throw a question at you that it hit me right between the eyes when I was reading through this stack. It's a bit provocative, so brace yourself.
Okay, I'm ready.
Here it is. What if the way we define spiritual maturity is actually limiting the impact we are meant to have?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's so provocative because most of us, well, we think we have a pretty firm handle on what a mature person of faith looks like.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. I've got the checklist in my head. They know their Bible inside and out. They pray every morning before the sun comes up. They've got excellent habits.
They don't use bad words. They're generally nice, stable people.
Exactly. If I check those boxes, I'm mature.
Right. It's the good Christian checklist. But here's where the sources throw a massive wrench in the gears. They argue that you can check every single one of those boxes. I mean, you can be morally upright, biblically literate, internally peaceful, and still be completely missing the point.
See, that's where I get stuck. Because aren't those good things? I mean, I've spent years trying to get better at those things. Is this material telling me I wasted my time?
Not at all. No, nobody is arguing for like impersonal regression or that you should start praying, but the sources warn about a very specific structural weakness in that definition.
A structural weakness.
Yeah, they call it the discipleship gap.
The discipleship gap. Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, we have accidentally redefined discipleship as being synonymous with personal growth. We sort of treat Jesus like a really high-end life coach who is there to help us become the best version of ourselves.
Right.
And the argument here is that if the end point of your faith is just inner peace or personal improvement, you end up with what the text calls informed believers.
Informed believers.
Right. You know a lot, you've consumed the information, but you aren't going anywhere. You are informed, but you're not sent.
Informed but not sent. That actually stings a little. It makes it sound like we're building libraries instead of, I don't know, launch pads.
That's a great analogy. And that is the core mission of this deep dive. We are trying to unpack the alternative presented in these writings, mission-shaped discipleship.
So we need to shift the lens.
Yeah, from spiritual self-improvement to kingdom participation.
So we aren't just looking at how to be better people, but how to actually participate in what God is doing.
Precisely. We need to connect the dots between personal faith and, well, global purpose. Because, as one of the articles put it, growing isn't enough if that growth doesn't go anywhere.
Okay, let's unpack this properly. The first big hurdle the sources identify is something they call the trap of readiness. And I have to be honest, I feel very called out by this section.
I think we all do.
The material compares modern discipleship to therapeutic culture. It's a fascinating comparison, isn't it?
It is.
But define that for us. What do they mean by therapeutic culture?
Well, think about the primary goal of therapy. It's usually emotional stability, self-actualization, healing past wounds, finding balance, all good things.
Which, again, I feel the need to defend. Those are great things. I want to be stable and healed.
We all do. But the source describes this as a quiet drift. We drift from obedience to self-improvement. We start thinking of the ultimate goal of faith is just to be healthy and safe. And that mindset, it births the readiness myth.
The readiness myth.
It's that assumption that says, I need to be fully formed, fully healed, and fully knowledgeable before I can be sent on a mission.
Oh, I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Literally all the time. I just need to take one more theology class, or I need to deal with this anxiety first, or I need to get my finances perfectly in order, and then I'll be ready to serve.
It's the standard operating procedure for most of us. We view mission as a postgraduate activity. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you look at Jesus's counter strategy, it just blows that idea out of the water.
Right. The sources highlight Matthew 4.19, follow me, and I will make you fishers of people.
Exactly. Look at the timing of that. When he said, follow me, it wasn't a syllabus for a 3-year study program. It was an immediate summons to movement.
He didn't say, follow me, sit in a classroom, pass an exam.
Get your certification, and then maybe we'll try fishing. No.
So formation and mission were fused from day one.
Exactly. The formation happens in the movement.
That is a scary thought for those of us who like to be prepared. I like to read the manual before I build the IKEA furniture,
I'll get it.
This feels like building the furniture while you're already sitting on it.
That's accurate. But the critique here is that the church often substitutes catechesis, which is just a fancy word for instruction, for commissioning, or sending.
Right.
One of the authors gave a great line: "We have a theological surplus, but a movement deficit."
Wow. A theological surplus, but a movement deficit. So we know too much and do too little.
In a way, yes. The key takeaway from this section is that discipleship isn't preparation for mission. It is participation in mission. You don't get ready to go, you go to get ready.
Okay, I hear that. And intellectually, it makes sense. But practically, that sounds chaotic. And this pivots us perfectly into our second segment.
It does.
If we aren't supposed to sit in a classroom until we are perfect, how did Jesus actually form people? The source calls this the pedagogy of movement.
Pedagogy just means a method of teaching, but think of it as the difference between, say, a lecture hall and a laboratory. Jesus formed disciples in motion.
And the text points to Luke 9:10, the sending of the 12 and the 70. But what stood out to me was the timeline.
The timeline is everything.
He sent them out before they understood the cross. They didn't even really know who he fully was yet. I mean, reading the Gospels, half the time they're arguing about who's the greatest, or they're terrified of a storm.
Or they want to call down fire on a village.
Exactly. They were definitely unfinished.
Oh, completely. Think about it from a modern hiring perspective. If Jesus is the HR director for Kingdom Inc., he is getting fired immediately for negligence.
Oh, absolutely. It's a liability nightmare.
He looks at these 12 guys who, let's be honest, are a mess. They are historically unreliable. They don't understand the theology. They're prone to infighting. And yet, he gives them authority and says, "Go, preach, heal, cast out demons."
Seems so backward. Usually you train, you test, you intern, you shadow a mentor for 5 years, and then you get authority. Why would he do it this way? It seems reckless.
It is reckless by our standards.
Yeah.
But the source calls this participation before proficiency. And here is the argument. This is the only way to learn true dependence on God.
How so?
Well, if you wait until you feel competent, who are you relying on?
Myself, my skills, my knowledge.
Exactly. But if you go when you feel unfinished, when you feel inadequate, you are forced to rely on the Spirit. You learn to trust God through failure and risk, not through theoretical study in a safe room.
So the risk isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature.
The risk is the classroom. And there's another layer here the sources mention: compassion over competence.
Right, the shared burden.
Jesus wanted them to feel the weight of the crowd's needs. You can't learn compassion for the lost by reading a book about demographics or poverty statistics.
No.
You have to go into the village, see the sick person, and realize, I can't fix this. I need God.
It's prioritizing depth over speed. You're forming the heart through obedience, not just informing the mind with facts.
Precisely.
Okay, so if we are tossing out the idea that maturity means knowing the Bible perfectly and having a stable life, we need a new definition. Segment 3 is about redefining maturity.
Yes.
And the source uses this phrase that I love, arrival versus alignment.
This is a crucial distinction. We often view maturity as arrival. Like, I've reached a state of static perfection. I have made it.
I am a mature Christian now. I have the badge. I can retire to the pew.
Right. But the source defines maturity as alignment. It's measured by availability and obedience to God's purposes. It's a dynamic state. It's about moving in step with God.
The text brought up a Greek word here, teleos. And I think this is really helpful because, words matter.
Yes, teleos. In the New Testament, when we see the word mature or perfect, it's often this word. But here's the kicker. It doesn't mean psychologically complete or flawless.
So it doesn't mean sinless or has no baggage.
No, it implies functional readiness or fullness of purpose.
Okay, break that down. What does functional readiness look like?
Imagine a hammer. You could have a hammer that is polished, gold-plated, sitting in a velvet box, not a scratch on it. By a flawless definition, that is a perfect hammer.
Yeah.
It has arrived.
Right.
But if you can't use it to drive a nail because you're afraid of scratching it, is it actually mature?
Not in the eyes of the carpenter. It's useless.
Exactly. A mature hammer is the one with the scratched handle, maybe a little dented, but it drives the nail straight every time. It fulfills its purpose. And the sources argue that we need to stop trying to be the gold-plated hammer in the box.
That completely changes how I read Ephesians 4, which the source referenced. Paul says leaders exist to equip the saints for the work of ministry.
Exactly. The goal of growth is contribution, not consumption. If you are growing just to grow, that's consumption. If you're growing to serve, that's contribution.
The source threw out some litmus test questions that were pretty tough. They suggested that instead of asking, am I growing, we should ask, who am I serving and who am I sent to?
Those are uncomfortable questions. Am I growing is internal. It's about how I feel. Who am I sent to? Forces me to look outward. It demands that my faith has an address other than my own heart.
Speaking of looking outward, that leads us to the big picture. Segment 4 is titled Breaking Parochial Faith.
Parochial is a great word here. It means narrow, limited to the local. And the problem is that our faith often becomes domesticated. We limit God to our local concerns, our personal comfort, our specific church community.
But the source introduces the Missio Dei.
The mission of God. The theology here is that mission isn't something the church invented to keep people busy on weekends. Mission originates in God. God is a sender. So to be formed in God's image is to be outward-facing.
And the text traces this geographically through the Bible. It shows it's not just a New Testament idea.
No, it's the whole narrative. You start with Abraham in Genesis 12. He wasn't just blessed for the sake of being blessed. He was blessed to be a blessing to all families of the earth.
Then you have the Psalm saying, "May all nations praise you," at Acts 1:8, from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth.
It's an ever-expanding horizon, but here's where I think a lot of listeners might check out.
Yeah, I can hear the objection coming. Okay, this sounds, but I'm not a missionary. I'm an accountant in Ohio, or I'm a teacher in Manchester. Does this really apply to me?
That's the common pushback. But the sources argue that this is a false divide, and they make a really interesting point. Thinking globally is actually the best way to strengthen your local faith.
How does that work? I mean, how does caring about something 5,000 miles away help me here?
It's about perspective. When your faith is domesticated, and it's just about your local church music or your personal comfort, it becomes fragile. Small problems feel huge.
Right, like if the air conditioning is too cold in the sanctuary, it becomes a crisis.
Exactly. It feels like a disaster because your world is small, but when you lift your eyes and see God moving in Iran, or the church growing under persecution in China, or the needs of the global poor, it expands your imagination.
It makes my complaints about the air conditioning feel a little petty.
It puts them in their proper place. It shifts you from a consumer mindset, does this church meet my needs, to a kingdom mindset. How does my life fit into what God is doing on this planet?
So thinking global helps you act local because it gives you the right purpose. That brings us to the practical side of things. We've talked theory, we've talked theology, but segment 5 is about practical disciplines.
Yeah.
How do we actually do this?
Right, the how.
The source talks about reorienting our standard habits: prayer, fasting, generosity.
Most of us treat these as inward disciplines. They are about my holiness or my needs. The shift these authors are calling for is to make them outward or missional.
Let's start with prayer. The text calls out using prayer as a spiritual ATM.
Guilty as charged, right? God, give me this, fix that, help me find my keys.
Bless me, bless my family, amen.
But the shift is toward prayer as intercession. And the model is John 17, Jesus' priestly prayer. He's praying for the world, for the mission. When we use prayer to intercede for others, specifically for the suffering church or for nations, we are bridging the gap between us and them. Prayer aligns our heart with God's heart for the world.
It stops being about my grocery list and starts being about the kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay, what about fasting? I usually think of fasting as just, well, being hungry to prove I'm serious.
The source frames it in a way I hadn't thought of before. Fasting as protest.
I love that phrasing. A protest against what?
A protest against self-sufficiency. In our culture, if we want something, we buy it or eat it. We are constantly filling ourselves. Fasting is a voluntary hunger that teaches us to distinguish between comfort and calling. It trains the body to say no to self so it can say yes to God.
That's profound. Hunger teaches us that we don't live by bread alone.
Exactly. And finally, generosity. The text calls for generosity as disruption.
Moving from surplus giving, which is just giving what's left over, to something that actually disrupts our lives.
The example used is the Macedonian church from 2 Corinthians. And this is a wild story. The text notes that they were in extreme poverty, not just tight on cash poverty.
Right.
And yet they bugged Paul for the privilege of giving to the church in Jerusalem.
That makes zero financial sense. A financial advisor would tell them to stop immediately. You can't afford this.
Right. But it makes total kingdom sense. They weren't giving because they had extra. They were giving to participate in what God was doing. It disrupted their reliance on material security. And the argument here is tough. If your giving doesn't impact your lifestyle, if you don't actually feel it, are you participating or just tipping?
That is a tough question. But it brings us back to that idea of risk. If we are just giving the crumbs, there's no risk.
And no formation. Remember, the whole premise of this deep dive is that we are formed by obedience. If the obedience costs us nothing, the formation is shallow.
So let's bring this all together. We've gone from being informed believers trying to check boxes to mission-shaped disciples who are, well, learning on the job.
The summary is really this. We don't wait to be ready. We become ready by going. The discipleship back is closed by movement, not by more information.
I want to leave the listener with the challenge from the source material. It asks a question that I think we should all sit with for a minute.
It's a good one.
To what extent has my discipleship been shaped by comfort rather than calling?
That's the diagnostic question. If you look at your spiritual life, your prayers, your spending, your schedule, is it designed to keep you comfortable or is it designed to make you available?
And here is a final provocative thought to chew on. The text says, obedience is not the reward of maturity. It is the means by which maturity is formed.
That flips everything. If you are sitting there waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel mature before you step out, you might be waiting forever.
Because the formation happens in the movement.
Exactly.
So the instruction isn't study more. It's simple. Move.
Just take one step.
Thanks for diving in with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.